Okie doke. Well, my name is Bill Garrity. For some of you who have been victims, I mean veterans of some of my classes before, so welcome back.
Hey,
Appreciate
can I make a quick announcement?
Certainly, please.
Maintenance came to me at 6:30 and wanted to mop the floor in the hallways. So I told him you couldn't because you would come in within 15 minutes. So what you're going to do is start about 7:15. So if you go out like to the restroom or something, you might want to just walk the stairs right out here, go up the stairs and go. But probably if y'all just sit through the class and he doesn't run you off, it should be dry by the time. I can harass you because you harass me.
Yeah, but we're being filmed. It'll be immortal. And I have to behave because you're staff.
And that's a wrap.
That's it? Good. Okay. Rita, you were...
Sorry, folks, we're out of time.
Yeah. Thank you so very much. Okay, before I was interrupted, my name is Bill Garrity. I've been the OCI director here for, this will be my 25th class coming up. So quite a bit, and been involved in teaching in the prep program. Had 7th grade for a while, then I was asked to do 10th, had the whole 10th grade for a while, and then I was asked to do 12th, and we have had the 12th class for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. When I first got it, we had 2 people, and we've been averaging between 50 and 60 now every Sunday. So it's the only 12th grade class, and it's a lot of fun. But as you can imagine, the topics are interesting because I have the adults on Sunday morning in OCI and then the 12th grade Sunday night. And so sometimes the topics are the same, sometimes they're not. But when they are the same, you can imagine that the answers may be slightly different or the delivery of the questions might be slightly different from the peanut gallery. So anyway, hopefully today what we're going to find out is a little bit about morality, and I encourage you to ask questions along the way, particularly at the end. I don't know everybody's grade levels here. Is everybody a catechist or about to be catechist? So sometimes the answers may vary a little bit, how you want to present certain things to certain age groups. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I think the most important thing is to first of all establish some core basics of what morality is. So in order to do that, I want to go directly to the Bible first. And we're going to start at chapter 1. No, we are not reading the whole Bible tonight. But we are going to start with chapter 1. So I'd ask for a volunteer for Genesis chapter 1, the first story of creation. And I'll stop. You don't have to read the whole thing. But please pay attention to the language that's being used by the authors here. Anyone want to have a go at that? Don't be chicken. You really don't want to hear me all night, gang. Please.
I'll read it. Which one?
Chapter 1.
Just chapter 1.
Start at the beginning.
In the beginning, first story of creation. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless wasteland, and darkness covered the abyss, while a mighty wind swept over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw how good the light was. God then separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Thus evening came and morning followed the first day. Then God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the waters, to separate one body of water from the other." And so it happened. God made the dome, and it separated the water above the dome from the water below it. God called the dome the sky. Evening came and morning followed the second day. Then God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered into a single basin, so that the dry land may appear." And so it happened. The water under the sky was gathered into its basin, and the dry land appeared. God called the dry land the earth, and the basin of the water he called the sea. God saw how good it was. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth vegetation, every kind of plant that bears seed, and every kind of fruit tree on earth that bears fruit with its seed in it." And so it happened. The earth brought forth every kind of plant and that bears seed, and every kind of fruit tree on earth that bears fruit with its seed in it. God saw how good it was. Evening came and morning followed the third day. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky, to separate day from night. Let them mark the fixed times, the days and the years, and serve as luminaries in the domes of the sky, to shed light upon the earth." And so it happened. God made the two great lights, the greater one to govern the day, and the lesser one to govern the night. And he made the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to shed light upon the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. God saw how good it was. Evening came and morning followed the fourth day.
Okay, hang on a second there. So what do we notice so far?
It's all good.
It's all good, right? Peaceful, tranquil, everything's good. Just checking, making sure you're with me. Okay, another volunteer to start at verse 20.
Okay.
Thanks.
Then God said, let the water teem with an abundance of living creatures, and on earth let birds fly beneath the dome of the sky. And so it happened. God created the great sea monsters and all kinds of swimming creatures, and with which the water teems, and all kinds of winged birds. God saw how good it was, and God blessed them, saying, be fertile, multiply, and fill the water of the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. Evening came and morning followed the fifth day. Then God said, let the earth bring forth all kinds of living creatures, cattle, creeping things, and wild animals of all kinds. And so it happened, God made all kinds of wild animals, all kinds of cattle, and all kinds of creeping things of the earth. God saw how good it was. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and the cattle, and over all the wild animals and all the creatures that crawl on the ground. God created man in his image. In the divine image he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, saying, be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all the living things that move on the earth. God also said, see, I give you every seed-bearing plant all over the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit on it to be your food. And to all the animals of the land, and all the birds of the air, and all the living creatures that crawl on the ground, I give all the green plants for food. And so it happened. God looked at everything he had made, and he found it very good. Evening came, and morning followed the sixth day.
Okay, thanks. Notice again, what's the tone?
Goodness.
Everything's still good, right? 6 days in, we're still good. No complaints so far. All right, then chapter 2 begins. Thus the heavens and the earth and all their array were completed. Since on the seventh day God was finished with the work he had been doing, he rested on the seventh day from all the work he had undertaken. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work he had done in creation. Such is the story of the heavens and the earth at their creation. So that's the end of creation story 1. Everything's hunky-dory, God's resting, all is good. On to chapter 2. Who'd like to give a shot at that? You guys are all shy, really. You don't want to hear me all night.
I'm not shy, I'll read.
Thanks. I won't make you do the whole thing.
At the time when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, while as yet there was no field shrub on earth, and no grass of the field had sprouted, for the Lord God had sent no rain upon the earth, and there was no man to till the soil. But a stream was welling up out of the earth, and was watering all the surface of the ground. The Lord God formed man out of the clay of the ground, and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and so man became a living being. Then the Lord God planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and he placed there the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God made various trees grow that were delightful to look at and good for food, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and bad. A river rises in Eden to water the garden. Beyond there it divides and becomes 4 branches. The name of the first is Pishon. It is the one that winds through the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is excellent. Bdellium and lapis lazuli are also there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one that winds all through the land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It is the one that flows east of Asher. The fourth river is the Euphrates. The Lord God then took the man and settled him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and care for it. The Lord God gave man this order: you are free to eat from any of the trees of the garden, except the tree of knowledge of good and bad. From that tree you shall not eat. The moment you eat from it, you are surely doomed to die.
Okay, let's pause there for a minute. So what has now entered into the equation here? Free will. What else?
kind of established the law, the first.
Right.
Punishment.
Right? There's a
Possibility of
consequence
punishment.
mentioned, right? And then we also have the first time the word bad is actually used to describe that tree. Okay, so it's good and bad. So all these things are now in play. And remember, we're only chapter 2, about halfway through. Okay, so who wants to pick up at verse 18? Thank you.
The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a suitable partner for him." So the Lord God formed out of the ground various wild animals and various birds of the air. And he brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Whatever the man called each of them would be its name. The man gave names to all the cattle and all the birds of the air and to all the wild animals, but none proved to be the suitable partner for the man. So the Lord God cast a deep sleep on the man, and while he was asleep, he took out one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. The Lord God then built up into a woman the rib that he had taken from the man. When he brought her to the man said, "This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of her man this one has been taken." That is why a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and the two of them become one body. The man and his wife were both naked, yet they felt no shame.
Okay. So, at the end of chapter 2, we're still pretty good. Okay? The only thing is, now we have a couple of rules that have to be paid attention to. But really, on the whole, we're still pretty good. Right? So, last chapter we're going to look at is chapter 3. Anybody want to have a start with that? This is the fun one. Go ahead.
However, the serpent was more crafty than any of the creatures of the earth that the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, "Why has God instructed you that you should not eat from every tree of paradise?" The woman responded to him, "From the fruit of the tree which are in paradise we eat. Yet truly, from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of paradise, God has instructed that we should not eat, and that we should not touch it, lest perhaps we may die." And the serpent said to the woman, "By no means will you die a death. For God knows that on whatever day you will eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." And so woman saw the tree was good to eat, and beautiful to the eyes, and delightful to consider, and she took from its fruit and she ate. And she gave to her husband who ate. And the eyes of them both were opened. And when they realized themselves to be naked, they joined together fig leaves and made coverings for themselves.
Okay, hang on a second there. I want to go back here to a couple things. Two things are going on. Notice, some of you have the New American Translation. Notice that's a different translation. So look at this one sentence. The woman saw that the tree was good for food, pleasing to the eyes, and desirable for gaining wisdom. A little bit different. So whenever you hear somebody quoting scripture, ask them what translation they happen to be using, because it can make a difference. Now in that case, is there a radical difference between the translations? No, but the word wisdom was dropped. Okay, it was pretty close all the way across in terms of general meaning, but the word wisdom was dropped in that translation. Big difference, because the temptation is that you'll be as smart as God. So just keep in mind, that's what's going on here. Okay? You want to keep going? Verse 8.
Okay. I got the New American Translation.
Okay. Well, that's all right. But it's a valid point. And every class we have somebody who brings their own Bible. I'm amazed you're getting a signal, by the way.
I'm on the Wi-Fi.
Okay. Holding out on me, huh? Okay. But start at verse 8.
And they heard the voice of Jehovah God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Jehovah God amongst the trees of the garden. And Jehovah God called unto...
It's not the Catholic Bible.
I thought
Here we go. I'll give you the old-fashioned way.
Okay.
Here you go.
I was
Right
using
there.
I was using the American Standard.
There you go. Use that one.
When they heard the sound of the Lord God moving about in the garden at the breezy time the man and asked him, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, but I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself." Then he asked, "Who told you that you were naked? You have eaten then from the tree which I have forbidden you to eat." The man replied, "The woman who you put here with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree, so I ate it." The Lord God then asked the woman, "Why did you do such a thing?" The woman answered, "The serpent tricked me too, so I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you shall be banned from all the animals and from all the wild creatures. On your belly shall you crawl, and dirt you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will strike your head, while you strike at his heels." To the woman he said, "I will intensify your pangs of your childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Yet your urge shall be for your husband, and he shall be your master." To the man he said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree of which I have forbidden you to eat, cursed be the ground because of you. In toil shall you eat its yield in all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to you, as you eat of the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall get bread to eat, until you return to the ground from which you were taken, for you are dirt, and dirt you shall return." The man called his wife Eve, because she became the mother of all living. For the man and his wife, the Lord God made leather garments with which he clothed them. Then the Lord God said, "See, the man has become like one of us, knowing what is good and what is bad. Therefore he must not be allowed to put out his hand to take fruit from the tree of life also, and thus eat of it and live forever." The Lord God therefore banished him from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he had been taken. When he expelled the man, he settled him east of the Garden of Eden, and he stationed the cherubim and the fiery revolving sword to guard the way to the tree of life.
Thanks so much for doing that. It's a long passage. Okay, so we didn't make it past chapter 3 in the Bible. Did you notice that? So how long did it take us to sin? Chapter 3 of the Bible. That's pretty much it. So if one were to look at the Bible, and this is the only advantage of print right now, right? I could show you this is how long we were in heaven. And the rest of this is how to get back. So when you look at the story visually, books sometimes have a neat little twist you can apply to them. But that's the amount of time. Remember, that includes the forward and all the other stuff. It's really not that long. So in reading time, it took us about 20 minutes to get out of heaven. That was the whole story. So this much time in heaven, this much time to get back. So one often wonders why I have a class on morality, because this is how much they wrote about it. And then there's all kinds of other books talking about how you apply the lessons learned in Scripture, which, by the way, our forefathers Adam and Eve did not do a very good job of. They only had one rule to obey, and it didn't work out for them. So, like most people, they had issues. And there's issues we have to discuss in regards to morality. So let's take a look at the first issue that we're going to put up on the board. This story is a wonderful revelation of human nature. And most people look at it and find it very simple. But the truth is, you can find all the core you want to in morality right here in the first 3 chapters. So the first issue that presents itself is human nature. So what do we find out about human nature? Anybody? Can be weak. Persuaded. Easily tempted. What else? Yeah. Yeah.
Competitive.
Uh-huh.
Blame other people.
Right. It wasn't just I want the apple, right? It was I want to be as smart as God. So human nature takes over. But at its very core, what it says is, did Adam and Eve really need anything? Did they need that tree? But what happened? They wanted it anyway. I wonder if that sounds familiar to any of us. Do we have everything we need? And do we still want stuff that we really don't need? So it's very core. It's a pretty apt description of human nature when you look at it. So that's the first issue to talk about. Notice what else. As soon as they got caught, everybody went like this. Not my fault. Adam says Eve made me do it. Eve said the snake made me do it. Nobody took responsibility for their actions. It was always somebody else's fault. So in a very simple story, we have a pretty good outline of what goes on in human nature. All of us know those examples. They've happened. What's the next thing? Consequences. I believe it was pretty clear in this story that there were consequences. Man, I'll bet you can't read that, can you? Consequences for your action. And it was pretty simple. God said, look, eat whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Don't touch the tree, lest you die. There wasn't a whole lot of equivocation there. Like, what part of don't do this was unclear? And yet, they went and did it. So, what can we draw from this? Doing what God instructed would have left the pair in paradise. They would never have left. So had they done what God asked them to do, it was a good consequence. There was a good result from that kind of action. Doing the opposite of what God instructed got them the boot. Out the door they went in chapter 3. So it is very core. It is its most simplistic form. Do what God tells you to do. Because it works out in the long run. But if you choose to do what God not to do what God tells you to do, it's not a very good consequence. It's a bad consequence. So right there, fundamentally, should you listen to what God says or not? Again, very simplistic out of that Bible. But notice also, being the tempter, he didn't get off scot-free and sit there going, I'm staying in paradise, you guys are out. He got the boot too. So it's not good to be the instigator either. There are consequences for being the tempter. So there's consequences for falling for temptation, but there are consequences for being the tempter. So everybody involved in this story, with the exception of God, of course, got the boot. They're out of there for what they did, for the decisions they made. So again, ultimately for us, what happens? Ultimately, the consequences of our decision lead us to heaven, hell, purgatory. But purgatory, of course, guarantees you heaven. So it's really heaven or hell. Okay, and that's the sum total. So if you're looking at consequences, and you look in the first couple of chapters in the Bible, it's pretty clear in its most simplistic form what we should do. Do what God tells you. Do not do what the tempter tells you. And generally, you're going to be okay. It may not feel like it all the time right away, but generally, you're going to be okay. And in the long run, you're definitely going to be okay. So again, those consequences have actions. All right, what's the next part? There's a conscience. Now, many people will say, is there really a conscience? Well, in the second creation story, we already see the origin of it. Who told them they were naked? And why did they go hide? It's pretty obvious that there's a problem here. Some might say it was a twang of guilt, a twinge of, uh-oh, we're in big trouble now. All of those things could be playing. But there's definitely a knowledge of right or wrong. So in the conscience, we all have had those twinges. You do something, you go like, yikes, that was not really good. You might not have meant it. You might have meant it, but you probably didn't mean the outcome. And the conscience goes, that was really not a good idea. It just wasn't. So you kind of see where this is going. Adam and Eve made a poor decision, realized it, and hid in the clouds. Why? Or hid in the bushes. Why? There is no explanation on the conscience, really. They knew they had done something wrong. So they hid. So a good point on this is, so what is a conscience? Well, let's use this for a definition. The faculty of recognizing the distinction between right and wrong in regards to one's own conduct. So when you look at it, That is really the definition of conscience. The faculty of recognizing the distinction between right and wrong in regards to one's own conduct. If you don't know what's right or wrong, you can't make decisions that are relevant. There is no consequence there. Okay, so in order to be guilty of anything or be able to have free will, you have to understand there's consequences to those actions. All right, and lastly, and this is pretty obvious, the other issue on the table is sin. Okay, which again, in its most fundamental form, is clearly represented in those first 3 chapters of Genesis. You can't get away from it. It was one thing. They intended to do it, and they did it. So let's take a look at it. So the first part, we couldn't even stay in sin free past chapter 4 of the first book of the Bible. That's a problem of itself. Second, Adam and Eve are the story of original sin. Original sin is our propensity to sin, to make bad choices. Okay? And it's been with human nature all the time, right from the beginning. There are 3 kinds of sin according to the Catholic Church. They are original. Original would not be defined in that you are the most creative person on the planet and have designed your own sins that have never been recognized before, known to man. That would not be the definition of original sin we're using here. Original sin meaning that we are born with the propensity to sin. It's something that we do. Serious or mortal sin, meaning those are sins that we know are wrong, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit. And then less serious or venial. Now, the serious and less serious actually comes from Mark Link, who writes several Catholic books, particularly high school religious books. But the bottom line is less serious defined as not serious is a very difficult definition. So venial at least paints another picture that there's some other category in there. And we're going to go into that in just a second. All sin is a choice to turn our back on God. Does everybody agree with me on that? No argument? Okay. All sin has consequences. Everybody agree with me there? Okay, so one can't sin in isolation. All right, which I always hear as a rebut to this, that one can't sin in isolation, that sin affects somebody else eventually, either through your behaviors or through the direct reaction of the sin. Intent can shape the seriousness of the action, okay, which is an important thing to keep in mind. Sometimes bad things happen, but they were not intended. Right? I could walk out tonight and let's say we have a knockdown, drag-out argument, with the camera person.
Yeah.
And the last thing you hear is me yelling at her. And we go out into the parking lot and I run her over. What is your reaction going to be? Did it on purpose. Right? I was arguing, I was screaming, we were yelling. She almost threw the camera at me. But at the end of the day, it appears like I did it on purpose. But the truth is, I might not have seen her. It's dark. Maybe the lights aren't on in the parking lot. Didn't see her. Now, no court in the land is going to support my argument that I didn't see her because there's 10, 15 witnesses in here that are going, he did it. He did it on purpose. And they have a point. But as far as morality goes, my intent was to do no harm. My intent wasn't to hit anybody. It was to get out of the situation and go home. There's a few lessons in there, but if intent has to be key, because things happen that are truly mistakes. Now, we use that word a little too much sometimes, or accidents, But there are times where unintended consequences happen. In fact, consequences that were not even intended at all as far as morality goes. So intent is going to be critical as we discuss sin a little further. And let's start with serious or mortal sin. I'm going to erase this. We'll start there. It's not staying up. So if we're at serious / mortal, you can almost tell by the way the things are labeled. Serious connotes that there's going to be some heavy things going on here. Okay, and generally some of the things, and again, I want you to be very cautious with this. This is Bill's definition of serious sin. It is not a thorough, entirely foolproof definition, but it hits most of the buttons. So if we look at it, it has to be a grave matter. ergo serious, right? So it has to be a grave matter. Generally, there's some amount of planning that's been put into this. This isn't random. This is planning. In other words, I'm going to do whatever it is, fill in the blank, and I work my way into doing it. And finally, we freely do the deed, fully understanding it's wrong. Okay, so loose definition of what that is. Does that cover every single possible permutation? Probably not, but it gives us a good working knowledge of what it might be. So what would examples be? Again, let's use our parking lot example. Let's say that argument was so fierce that I said, you know what, I got 15 minutes till that camera's parked, packed, and put away, whatever's going to be going. I'll just put the car under the tree, lights out, and just wait. Are you nervous yet? Just We're actually buddies. So.
Did you use the same example in class?
I think I named somebody else, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they lived.
The 12th grade. So when you look at this, if I lay it, I'm sitting there hiding under the trees, waiting for her to come out, and I run her over. I pretty much plotted it, understood it was wrong, did it. Okay? There's no mystery there. Again, the converse to that is I honestly didn't see her. It looks really bad to all of you, but the truth was it was not intended. I might go to jail. I might have a very difficult time convincing anybody I'm innocent, but I'm not guilty of a serious sin. I could be guilty of negligence, being a lousy driver, a whole bunch of other things, but it was not intentional to harm somebody at that point. Does everybody follow me? Okay. Questions so far? Okay. So as you look at this and you start looking at guidelines like commandments, for instance, and it sounds very easy to say, thou shalt not steal. But watch what happens a little bit later in class when we start discussing that. Okay? Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? And then we'll point out some things and you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, so what about venial sin? The definition, I didn't write this, the definition is venial sin is simply less serious sin than a serious sin, but still admits of some seriousness. Mark Link, S.J., meaning Jesuit. Okay, but the truth is what he's saying is you're not off scot-free. It just doesn't have the gravity of a serious sin. In other words, it's still serious. For instance, you may be a habitual white liar where you get to the point where you don't even know you're lying anymore. It's not intentional, and it may not be grave, but it's not telling the truth either. So there could be a problem there. There could be a problem there. Okay? You got to be aware of that. There are things that aren't intentional, but after 60 days of doing the same thing unintentionally, there's a problem there. Okay? Every time you walk by a bread stand, you steal a loaf of bread. You might not intend to do that, but you're still stealing a loaf of bread. There's a problem there. So look at behavior. Sometimes it's a pattern of behavior where there isn't necessarily a grave matter, but there's things that are constantly being done. I'm nagging constantly in the office. Doesn't sound like it's a serious sin, right? Except I've made everybody's life so miserable that when they go home, they're screaming at their husbands, their wives, their kids, and the poor dog gets kicked at the end. The dog didn't do anything. How did this happen? Well, it's because I was just nagging all day. I was having a pity party and took it out on my employees. Serious sin? I don't know. But it clearly had ramifications. So I may go home going, geez, that was a lousy day. But meanwhile, there's 32 arguments brewing in houses across the state that are my fault because I was having a lousy day and decided I'd have a pity party and take it out on everybody else. It wasn't planned that way. Events went that way. It just happened. But if it happens day in, day out, there may be a pattern there. So again, it's not necessarily a grave matter, but it's nothing to just dismiss either, particularly if you find that there's a pattern of it. And that's why the conscience is so important, is the conscience informs us that maybe there's something not right here. If it's an isolated incident, maybe it's no harm, no foul. But at the end of the day, if the patterns persist, there could be a problem. And it's something you have to take a look at. So again, to summarize, we have original sin, we have serious or mortal sin, and then we have less serious or venial sin. Okay, everybody clear on that? Clear as mud, I'm betting. All right, so we're going to try a couple of things here. Okay. Okay, so we want to break into groups. You who are OCI vets get this drill. You've done it before. Those of you who are not, or if you survived 12th grade, you also get this drill to a certain extent. All right, but I want you to take a look at this. First question is, discuss with the group how stealing a loaf of bread can be a serious sin, a venial or less serious sin, and perhaps not sinful at all. So why don't you guys, if you guys can combine, and then maybe you guys combine over there and this table stay in the middle. We'll do it that way, okay? So again, how stealing a loaf of bread can be a serious sin, a venial or less serious sin, or perhaps not sinful at all. So the requirement, yeah, just keep them in like 4s or 5s is a little bit easier to deal with. Yeah. Okay, now the charge here is to come up with an example of each, not to pick one. Oh, good. Yourself?
I'm
How'd you
doing
get
great.
roped into this?
No, I volunteered. This is going to be my profession, so I said, why not?
Cool. We ought to pause until they get done.
No, it's looking at them.
Okay. Well, you may want to pause it till they're back to, you know what I mean?
But maybe it would be irritated. Having more freedom.
You know, it's hard to come up with these things because God written.
I know?
Let's think about the kids, guys.
I try to be humble and honest, but I just, a lot of your parents have some they honor you, you honor them. The parents honor their kids, and the kids should honor their parents.
Like you planned it, like every day.
Then maybe if you just make up a story to get out of trouble, like you've gotten into trouble over the night and come home. But I haven't. I don't get into drinking parties and
Or not at all.
have a person. I know maybe if you get into trouble with somebody, try to work with people. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
But if things like you think like it's alive yourself, that everybody else is around you just think it's alive.
Yeah, it could be you, or you actually killed him, but you said that would be the mom. That would be.
Yeah, maybe it means something different to one person than another person.
So maybe the serious life is maybe some good stuff that I say,
Oh, that's a mortal. If you're taking somebody else down the line, that's mortal. You're trying not to hurt their feelings.
That'd be really bad.
They didn't know you were lying.
That's pretty fun. Good way to spend a Monday night.
That's fun.
It is. I
Plus
would
it's
totally
not sitting
sign
there
up for your
listening to a
class
2-hour
during the school
lecture.
year. You know, like, you have to be that whole 5 years older. That messed me up right now.
Unless you put like, put a certain age and be like,
Right.
I'm over it.
find out. I'll find out where it is. I mean, that's the first I've seen it off.
You probably still have my number, email,
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah. Now, somebody in here's got it, so they're doing something with it. I'll ask Rita. When Rita comes in, ask her. Yeah. It's like, where'd the picture go? Yeah.
Baby, and all of a sudden he's a teenager.
That's. I looked at it. I like, what? Somebody swiped the picture?
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
That is mortal sin.
Yeah. It's plenty sticky. I'll bet it got humid. It was gorgeous, actually. Had one of my overused quotes for OCI: "Be open to the experience." Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm guessing the air conditioning probably failed when it got really humid. Yeah, that's what. If I was guessing, I bet that's what happened. But where it went's in a whole other question now. Well, at least we know where a copy of the picture is if it has to be redone. Yeah. 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 Are we good? You guys good? Okay. You guys good?
That sounds like, to me, because I think the guys think of it different.
In terms of self-judgment, because that's essentially what we're talking about here in morality. It's not my job to judge you. In fact, I'm probably going to do a pretty bad job of that if that's what I attempt to do. Because as you said, how would I know the boat's full of folks who could be killed in that scenario? I could say, man, you lied. But I have no clue what's going on in that situation. So we are not called to be judges. That's the first thing, except of ourselves, because we know truly what our intent was when those actions were committed. And that's the key. When you're talking about serious sin, you have to understand what's going on in here. And so you have to be honest with what's going on in here. And it's hard. Some folks are so cold-hearted, it's very difficult to break through the rock and get down inside because it's not a pretty place. And so when you talk about reconciliation, that is the remedy for serious sin. There is no other remedy. One goes to the priest and confesses what you have done. And the truth is, the priest is going to welcome you back. Because when you're in a state of serious sin, you are barred from communion. You have to have that resolved. That hasn't changed. Okay, but that's an important part. But the first key is to recognize what the behaviors are. Because then at least you have a starting point to consider, was I really planning that? How bad was it? Those sorts of things. But you also have to be careful of rationalizing too. Sometimes it is what it is. And you just have to face up to it and say, it is what it is. I need to go straighten this out and get right with God. That's the whole thing. Now, some people will say, why do I have to go to a priest for reconciliation? Anybody heard that question before? Okay. Well, the priest represents the community offended. So because you can't apologize to everyone you've affected, go back to my example of me having my pity party and there's now 30 households around Georgia that are totally miserable. How do I apologize to the 15 dogs who got kicked because of what I did? I can't. I just can't get there. And I can't apologize to the kids, and I can't apologize to the spouses. I might apologize to the people in the office, but the ripple effect went way beyond that. And you could see that example over and over again. If I go to a grocery store and I steal a Hershey bar, what happens? The price of Hershey bars for everybody else just goes up because it's a phenomenon called shrinkage. The merchant will become whole at the expense of those who have not sinned. Okay? That's what will happen in the long run. So if I steal that candy bar, I have no way of apologizing to everybody else who's paying higher prices because of that thievery. I have no way of doing it. Even if I go back 2 months later and go, I stole a Hershey bar, here's the money. Damage is done. Simplistic, but you see what happens. There's a cause and effect here, and it keeps going on and on and on. So reconciliation, the reason we go to a priest is the priest represents the community offended. And the priest says, I absolve you from all your sins in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. He doesn't say, I absolve you because I can. It's a big, big difference. All right, scripturally, Peter is given the keys. Whatever you hold bound, it's bound. Whatever you loose is loose. And that's the tradition that it comes from, Peter being the first pope. So scripturally, you have some definitions there. But truthfully, it's the best thing that we can do. Because again, as I said, you can't get back to everybody you've offended. There's just no way. So the priest represents the community offended. And a lot of people will say, it's a great experience. I feel a lot better after going to reconciliation. The problem is folks wanting to get there in the first place, because they look at it as a sacrament of humiliation, and it isn't. It's a sacrament of healing. And it's healing that rift that gets caused by our bad choices. So we all agreed early on that sin was bad choices. We choose to do the wrong thing. And as a result, there are consequences. In the Adam and Eve story, consequences where they got the boot. Ultimately, all of our actions have consequences. So one thing to consider is it easier to go to reconciliation in short periods of time or talk to God about your entire life? Because the cool thing about the Catholic Church is a serious confession where one is truly contrite, those sins are forgiven. You don't have to go back there. Non-confessed sins, you're still going to deal with it anyway. You're just compounding the issue. It just goes on and on and on. Whereas if you take advantage of the sacrament of reconciliation, you don't have to deal with the past anymore. It's resolved. So there's a beauty to the sacrament that one needs to consider. And ultimately, as I said, it's not a sacrament of humiliation. It's a sacrament of healing. There is nobody who has never committed a sin. There's nobody in this room who is sin-free. And none of the priests will claim they're sin-free unless they just walked out of confession. Everybody goes to confession. And it's confidential. Some of the craziest things are when you're in reconciliation is, the priest is going to tell everybody what I did. He probably has heard it all before. You may have an interesting twist on it. You might. But that's not why they're there. They're not there because they're waiting for a doozy to go like, whoa! That's not the purpose of it. The purpose is, they understand. Well, I'll tell you a story in a minute. No, I can't, because I'll tell you a story after the camera's on. No. I know. All right. But the bottom line is, yeah, I can't do that on camera. So but the truth is, the priest is there to welcome you back. And again, everybody has sinned. So we're only kidding ourselves if we're acting like there's nothing wrong. There's something wrong with everybody. It doesn't mean you're evil, bad, mean, nasty, or anything else, but it means we have some issues that we need to fix. Hey, so what are the best sources for guidelines? Well, the easiest is to look at the Ten Commandments, but then take a look at your catechism where it breaks it out. For instance, honor your father and your mother is in the catechism, right? And most people translate that to be, I should really be nice to mom and dad. But if you read it in the catechism, it goes on saying about respect for authority. That means government. That means the police officers on the road. That means everybody in authority. We should have a respect for that. And as you look at those commandments and realize it's much simpler than the one sentence, honor your father and your mother. Thou shalt not steal. Most people think of armed robbery when they hear that story. But what about stealing in a test? There's all kinds of things in there. Most people hear about lying, but what if you just sit there and let something occur while somebody else is lying? Are you guilty of that too? Because there are sins of omission and commission. If you know something wrong is happening and you know the truth and you don't speak up, maybe that's false witness, huh? So when you look at all these things, you can see why not everything is crystal clear. And you can see why when people are saying, hey, what religion are you? Say Catholic. We're called to be living a different standard. Doesn't mean we're perfect at it, but we're called to be living a different standard. How do you do that? By being honest with yourself and recognizing the pitfalls that are out there for all of us, the traps that are out there, and recognizing that there are temptations and you have to be able to resist them. Is it a sin to be tempted? Everybody agree no? Yeah. I've had split decisions in some other groups, so It's not a sin to be tempted. It's a sin to fall for temptation. A temptation presents itself. You have a choice to either go the way of the temptation or to back off and say no. Those are our choices. Okay, so at its fundamental root, all sin comes down to personal choice. All morality comes down to personal choice. And remember how when Eve was tempted, the idea was you'll be as smart as God? That would allow the justification of people to say, I'm smarter than God, therefore I will do it my way. Us falling for temptation is no different than the story presented in Genesis. If we fall for temptation, we're saying we're smarter than God because we already know what God wants us to do. So again, going back to very early on in the presentation, if you do what God says, it generally works out in your behalf. Okay? If you don't, it generally doesn't work out too well. Okay? But the beauty of reconciliation is maybe that recognition of mistake, if sincerely contrite, can be wiped away. And that's the beauty of the sacrament. So it's not a problem going to a priest for the sacrament, it's an opportunity. And that's how we have to look at it. But you can't take full advantage of the sacrament if you don't understand why you're going there to begin with. And that's the difficult part. So what happens in a gray area? You know, we've talked about things that are cut and dry. What happens in a gray area? Well, there's a couple of things we should do. One is pray on any action you're going to take prior to taking the action. Sometimes things are not clear. They just aren't. And sometimes you're sitting there, the example, what should I do? Either way, I'm guilty of something. Or either way, the outcome doesn't look too good. If I go this way, it's bad. If I go that way, it's bad. What should I do? Well, don't make the decision right then and there. Take a moment. People get in that with life support. You know, it's a difficult situation. What should I do? Because either way, the outcome doesn't look real promising. What decision should I make? Well, the first decision is don't be rushed into making a decision. Take a step back, pray on that decision. If it's still unclear, seek clarification. Look for the guideline. What is the church teaching on that? At least find that beacon where you say, here's the church teaching on this particular thing. How is my decision lining up with that? If it still remains unclear, seek advice or counsel from somebody who knows. Talk to one of the priests. Talk to somebody that you know that knows some of the teachings of the church pretty well. Get some opinion. Say, hey, look, I got this. I'm really wrestling with this. What should I do? And at the end of the day, are you comfortable that you've made the best decision possible? Because that whole process is clearly indicating that the intent is not to do the wrong thing. The intent is to do the right thing. But it's taking the time and it's exploring what needs to be done before one takes an action. And so these gray areas are very real in life. Not everything is crystal clear. It's not always I either go right or left. Sometimes it's maybe I go like this for a while because that decision's not real clear. And I'm not sure which direction I should be going in. And the only way to get around that is to actually pray on it, ask God for some guidance, and talk to people who can help. It's not crystal clear. Most of us get into trouble because we start doing things pretty quick. You know, part of that's the nature of society. We all like things fast. That's why fast food is everywhere, right? One thing's fast, but sometimes it clouds our decision making that we feel like we have to do something right away, and maybe we don't. So when you start looking at these things, there are gray areas. But when it's all said and done, the remedy for all these kinds of sin is reconciliation. Why? Because there is a judgment ultimately. For we as Catholics, you can say, okay, where does this lead? If I don't go to reconciliation, what happens? You're still going to deal with it. The only question is when. Bill's Book of Wisdom indicates it's a lot easier to deal with things in small increments and put them away. And the grace of the sacrament may be if you find yourself a habitual favorite sin, which a lot of us do. We find one we get really good at. The idea of going to confession frequently is you start recognizing that you're getting really good at that, so you're trying to break the habit of what it becomes, so that you find yourself ultimately and less frequently sinning or committing the same sin because you're holding yourself accountable, where before you were just like, whatever, move on. Okay? But you will find, I'll bet all of you, if you think about it when you go to confession, how much of it is similar. And hopefully, like when I went into the priest when I was a kid in Philadelphia and I said 482 times, I rarely drop the F-bomb anymore. You know? Rarely. But it took a long time of practice. It took a long time of recognizing there's really no point in it. And so it's the same thing. You get into habits, sometimes you don't recognize what you're doing over and over and over again. When you start holding yourself accountable, you find, you know what, this is starting to get embarrassing. It's the same thing all the time. I need to do something to change that behavior. Well, why not start with reconciliation? It's easy, it's simple, and it works. That's what grace is. It gives you the strength to persevere and not do that again. Remember the act of contrition, one of the key phrases, to sin no more and to avoid the near occasions of sin, amen. So if you go to Buckhead every Saturday, get yourself in trouble, you're drunk and you end up in jail, and you repeat the process every week, that's not going to work. Even if you go to confession and you say, blessed be Father, for I have sinned, I went to Buckhead, got in big trouble. The priest says, well, I forgive you this time. And then next Friday, blessed be Father, for I have sinned, I went to Buckhead and got in big trouble. After a while, the problem is you keep going to Buckhead. You need to stop. The intent to do it no more has not entered into the realm of your consciousness yet, even though you said that in the prayer. Okay, so these things are very serious. The prayer's words are there for a reason. An act of contrition is serious for a reason. It's to avoid the near occasion of sin, which means if you recognize you have sinful behavior, what caused it? Get to the root of it and stop it. Stop going there. Or stop seeing that person, or stop talking to so-and-so, whatever it is, but find a way to stop. Okay, because so at the end of the day, why is all this important? Well, again, we already discussed there's a judgment, right? So in the judgment, ultimately, it's heaven or hell. And that judgment is a judgment of your actions. It's not a judgment of anything else. My actions aren't going to help your judgment. Well, they might a little bit here, but in general, it's a one-on-one show. So if you're a judgment and you and God are talking, and he goes, so Bill, what were you thinking when you did? And you go, it was a long time ago. I'm not sure what I was thinking. Was it right? Was it wrong? Is your answer good enough? Or is it better to deal with it in short little outbursts? Because the question is, Bill, what were you thinking when you did, is not going to disappear. That will be there. That's part of the judgment process. Even worse would be, who are you? I never heard from you. You didn't call, you didn't write. Translation, pray. You didn't talk to me. Who are you? All of that gets resolved when we start getting honest with ourselves. We take a look at what's sinful and what's not. We recognize the pain it causes God. It severs that relationship. We go to reconciliation to try and repair that damage so that by the time you get to a judgment, it's like, hey, you're here finally. Good to see you. Let's discuss a few of these things that we still have remaining, and let's put it to bed, as opposed to, who are you? Or, what were you thinking when you did this? And is your answer good enough? You see, I don't know. I can't tell you. All of us like to think God's merciful and kind and generous and all that, but I mean, to what point? So we need to be aware of that. And so when you're looking at morality, a lot of people say, why do I have to be concerned about that? Well, because ultimately, people of faith believe there's somewhere beyond this that we end up, and that somewhere beyond this is determined by our actions. That would be consistent with Catholic teaching. State of serious sin would bar one from heaven, so it needs to be forgiven. Somehow, some way. For Catholics, it's the use of the sacrament of reconciliation. Well, remember, God does the forgiving. The priest uses the words of absolution, but it's God who does the forgiving. And that's really who you're talking to at the end of the day. You're saying, look, God, I recognize I did this. It was the wrong thing to do. I'm really, really sorry for it. And I'm not planning on ever doing it again. Some of us walk around with these things for years. You got one doozy in there, and for some reason it becomes like a security blanket. You can't let go of it. You want to be miserable forever because you're used to it. I can't possibly tell Father this. And the truth is, yes, you can possibly tell Father, and you probably should. And you should probably put the whole thing to bed and stop carrying that weight around. Lord knows we have enough other issues we have to deal with. Self-inflicted ones like that are crazy. Go to a priest, get them confessed, and get rid of it. Because the whole study of morality is, when you look at the book, is to get back to heaven. The whole rest of that Bible is the story to get back to heaven. The Catechism takes the Ten Commandments and it breaks it out and it tells you the real theory behind it, what the church thinking is on all those commandments and what possibly enters under those categories so that you have a better idea. And remember, we as Catholics subscribe to the church, fancy word alert, magisterium, the teaching authority of the church, the ability to tell us as Catholics really kind of the way we should be looking at these issues and how we should react and deal with them. So once you learn the Ten Commandments, which most of us have had to learn and do know, look at what they really mean. It's not just being nice to your mom and dad, which is a good thing. Okay? It's a little more detailed than that. It's a little more intense than that. You know, people say, thou shalt not worship strange gods, right? That commandment. And everybody thinks that when they built the golden calf in the desert and they're all going worshiping the cow of gold, whatever it is. But the truth is, we got the same problem. We got the same problem. You got to look at it beyond what's in your memory with those simple little sentences. They're very powerful, but there's a lot more to it than just those simple lines. They point to a greater process of decision making and a greater understanding of how we relate to one another. So the purpose of a study of morality is to really understand our own behaviors and get better as Catholic Christians. That's the purpose of the study of morality. The remedy for all this sinfulness is to try and get better at not sinning and to use the tools that the church gives us. For the OCI folks, they get tired of hearing it, but all I ever say to them is, look, choose the church that gives you the most tools to get to heaven. That's really your job as somebody who's shopping for a church, is find the one that gives you the most tools to use to get you to heaven. There isn't anything better than reconciliation if you want to keep on a true path, because you're holding yourself accountable. People who don't have that luxury have told me in interviews that they don't think they're forgiven. Because whatever it is that they think is so unforgivable, they'll just never be forgiven, even though they keep asking. So they're not talking to anybody about it. And you have to open up. At some point you recognize it. Use the tools that we have. So within the church, we have the tool of the remedy and reconciliation. We have the tool of understanding. You can find the Ten Commandments, Catechism, the Bible, and a whole bunch of other publications to look at in terms of how we should behave and what the best behaviors are. But we have guidelines and guidebooks. Okay, so we have the knowledge, we have the power to learn, and we have a remedy for when we make a mistake. That's a pretty good place to go if you're looking for tools to try and keep you on the straight and narrow. The only ingredient there is you have to choose to do it. And that choice is no harder than choosing to sin. It's just what you choose. It's what you want to go. So I'm going to pause here for a second. Any questions? About anything? Okay. So everybody knows at judgment, right? The outcome is heaven, hell, or possibly purgatory. Limbo is no longer. For those of you who hang on to the limbo thing, that left. Okay? Yeah. The Caribbean. All right. But again, when you look at it, okay, so what happens first? Well, first there's death and there's a judgment, right? And when we're looking at judgment, it's really sum total of what we've done. As an outcome of that, their choice is heaven, hell, or purgatory. Okay, and if you get purgatory, if that's what happens, it's not so bad. It's guaranteed heaven. Okay, so it's not a horrible thing if that's where you wind up. However, hell is unforgivable. Once it's there, it's there. There's no second chance. Party's over. You've gone straight to hell. And if you want to look at some definitions for it, here's a good one. Hell is eternal separation from God, freely chosen by the sinner in consequence of a bad, immoral life. So who's to blame? Yep. Who's to blame? Heaven Eternal union with God promised to those leading a good and moral life. Purgatory, a middle state where some sort of purgation or purification takes place, meaning there may be some issues that we still need to deal with. People want to often challenge that and say, where does that come from, the idea of a purgatory? And the first thing people refer to, for Catholics in particular, is the book of Maccabees, second book of Maccabees. And there's a battle that takes place. I think it's chapter 12. There's a battle that takes place, and the generals line up all the bodies, and then there's a service praying for the dead. There's no reason to pray for the dead, really, if they went straight to hell or straight to heaven. So the tradition of praying for the dead actually precedes Christ. But it continues on. And there's other examples of that when you're doing that. The dead have already been judged at that particular point in time. But in the case of purgatory or middle state, those prayers are useful. And prayers are never a waste of time. But if you're looking for things that can point to there might be a middle state, that sort of thing, but it's not a bad theology, really. If you're from Vegas, if it's heaven, or hell, you're at 50-50, right? If you add purgatory in there, you're what, about 67% chance now? Odds are a little better in the Catholic Church, aren't they? I know, it's on film. But if you look at it, it's actually very optimistic theology. A lot of people think it isn't. And a lot of people think it's a long, long time because we try and measure everything the way we understand time. But we really don't know what a day to God is. God created the world in 6 days in that first story in Genesis. I don't know what that meant. What's a day to God? Especially against eternity. See, this is why I was a liberal arts major, because the scientists all want to try and figure out what eternity means. I just know it's a much longer time than I can comprehend. So when you start looking at those kinds of things, you end up saying, well, really, how bad could purgatory be? And it's not to make light of it. What it's saying is maybe we have some issues we haven't addressed in our relationship with God. And it doesn't mean we led a bad life. It just means there's a couple things we need to work out. Okay? As opposed to someone who has purposefully, continuously, and by choice turned their back on God and doesn't look back because they're smarter. Okay, so as you look at these things, there's different stories here. Some people would argue that purgatory is kind of like, well, there was a good effort applied, and therefore there are some things that we need to take a look at. And a loving, forgiving God, I could see that totally. But once you've made the decision, look, I don't care who you are, God, it's that and the other thing, there's one outcome. It's all there is going to be. And heaven is guaranteed. So again, when you look at the definitions, they're pretty clear what's going to happen here. So the reason morality is important is to get to the place you want to be. So if that happens to be heaven, then let's make sure we get there. All right? Now there's all kinds of long drawn out things. Now normally this is like a 6-hour presentation over 3 days for the OCI. You guys are being way too quiet, like there's no questions at all. None at all.
Well, I do have one that comes up a lot with other Christian faiths about purgatory. And that's always the most difficult one to really try to explain to someone that's not Catholic. And it's basically that they almost view it as a negative versus a positive. And I like the 67%.
Yeah.
That's a good way to explain it.
I'm just saying, if they're gamblers, but of course if they're fundamentalists, they're not gamblers, so it may not work.
And it kind of ties back to what you were saying earlier about reconciliation. You know, in fact, Randy had a conversation with someone the other day, and they said, well, we have, what do they call them? Life. They have accountability partner that they go to, that there's no reason to have to go to a priest to be forgiven of sins, and it's hard to try to break through the explanation.
It's difficult, and there are so many different branches of Christianity right now, it's hard to peg what one that particular one is. But the core value of where this came from is the oldest tradition in Christianity. So when you look at the Catholic Church, and this is from a historical perspective, it's the oldest tradition. It is. So when you keep going, everything else is a derivative that came off of that for whatever the reason. I'm not arguing the right or wrong of anything here. But I'm just saying it's a derivative. And it's selectively derivative. Take the stuff you like, the hard stuff maybe I'll leave behind. And maybe some of it was justified in the time. I mean, you have to study church history to really get into the detail of that, and we don't have the time or the scope for that in this particular one. But the truth is, the concept of heaven and hell has been there all along. The concept of a purgatory talked about, realistically, was that person's intent to live a godless life. And you could see how that would play out in terms of a judgment. There's no guarantees, guys. I mean, there just isn't. But you can see how that would play out. Okay? The intent of that individual is not to be godless and to turn their back on God. In fact, their history showed time and time again they picked themselves up, got back on the path, and tried to do the right thing. So, to me, it's a very positive theology, and it's consistent with a loving God who forgives us in spite of our transactions.
Part of the argument for other Christian denominations is that they have eliminated Maccabees from their Bible, so they don't have that.
Well, there are 7 missing
scripture.
books.
You know, so when you tell them what's in the Bible, well, their Bible doesn't have it.
Hey,
So, and there again, that's just an argument of our faith.
Well,
So
and
we
again,
believe
it was edited out, so this has been in there for a long, long time. The bottom line on the whole thing is, besides the fact that the King James Version costs exactly the same as this one and is missing 7 books and some edited versions of Daniel and Esther, is that there is philosophy that shows what was going on even before Christ. There was a tradition of praying for the dead. It's not just Catholic, and the problem is it's selective reading of Scripture too sometimes. So that's why I said earlier, what translation are you reading? Because it explains a lot right then and there. And as I said, there's a lot of other things we could discuss, but not in this particular window of time that would point things out. And a study on the Bible itself is a good one to undertake if you haven't done that. And for a lot of folks, even just looking at the first 3 chapters of Genesis like we did tonight is a different experience. Everybody knows the story, but they haven't tunneled into it. Because that is the story of morality in its inception right there. It explains away a lot of things. But the concepts of purgatory, remember, the church was also, the magisterium has the teaching authority to take those situations and draw its conclusions from it. Okay? It's very difficult. There's nothing in the Bible that says abortion is wrong. But it does say thou shalt not kill. You can argue multiple ways. You can go round and round and round for that. But starkly saying it has to be in the Scripture to be so isn't really true. And remember, particularly, the first gospel was written 30 years after the resurrection. So it's largely highlights. It's not a play-by-play. It wasn't a Walter Cronkite with a film crew there saying you were there. These things go on and on and on. For kids who are watching this, Walter Cronkite was a news anchor from way back when, the black and white TV era. So, but you look at those things, and it's tough because you get the distortions that are in there. But as Christian sects have continued to split and splinter, some of the theologies have become really watered down. The church's theologies have been very consistent on the sacraments.
Just something that I've come across in on the Catholic, I've been a catechist in another parish and here too, that the idea of heaven and hell, and that you have to believe in Jesus Christ as our Savior to go to heaven, and that is not necessarily the situation. I mean, when you have children that go to public school and are in situations with children that are of other religions, and in a 4th grade class, a person was basically saying this to a 4th grade Catholic class, that, well, you know, they have to believe in Jesus Christ in order to go to heaven and be saved. And a lot of these kids were thinking, well, my friend is not Christian or not Catholic, and what do you say to them? And some of them felt like they needed to go and tell them that they needed to do all this stuff.
Well, God decides. I mean, clearly God decides. But, I mean, for Christians, well, remember, here's the problem when you look at it, and it's really an opportunity to a certain extent. Evangelism is always one of the core, for Catholicism too, guys. I mean, we shouldn't run away when somebody mentions religion to go like, I know nothing, and not engage in that. I think there's proper places. In the middle of a business meeting is probably not the ideal place, maybe afterwards. But, at school, what kids say is hard. Catholics would say, you're right, you have to believe in God in order to, 'cause if you don't believe in God, the idea of heaven's a foreign concept to begin with. So if somebody's truly ignorant of all these concepts, are they going straight to hell? Does that sound like the God you know? I mean, truly ignorant, had no chance, doesn't know, the whole 9 yards. Somebody who turns their back on the concepts, maybe that's a different argument. But again, our role is not to be the judge. Our role is to state clearly what our beliefs are and let others choose what they wish to choose. For the gang that's been through the OCI, they'll tell you, I don't do comparative religions. That's not what we're about. We're talking about what the church believes. Why? Because there's so many splinter Christian groups. Even if I was an expert, I wouldn't be an expert. I might be good at a few of them, but with the number of denominations out there, none of us are going to be good at all of them. So how do you explain to a fourth grader that? You say, basically, that's accurate. We do need to believe in Jesus Christ. He showed us a way to get to heaven. It's not the only way. The Jewish faith shows a way to get to heaven too, and it is the same God. There's a different belief in the Savior there. We believe that it's easier by following the way of Jesus Christ to attain heaven. That would be consistent with, I'd say, almost all the Christian faiths. I guess you can always find an exception, but I would say that's consistent with all of them. But the choice is which church gives you the tools to make it easier. And in my opinion, the Catholic Church gives you a lot of resources to use to try and attain that goal. And that should be ultimately the main objective of a church, is to lead us through this life in a morally acceptable way to gain heaven. I mean, there's probably a million other reasons you could throw out there, but in the context of what we're discussing here tonight, I think that's totally the bounds of the church within this conversation.
Can you address a little bit faith and works? Because that's another discussion that I notice comes up a lot when you're talking about different Christian denominations.
Yeah, it's a misunderstanding of some of the arguments of Paul, but I mean, the truth is, if you are a faith-filled person, the work should follow.
It comes up. We've been involved in.
Still on film? No, I can get away with this one quick. No, she's got it back up.
I just changed faith.
Okay. I have to behave. But he does this thing, and it's like a spiral thing, and some of you guys have seen it. And it talks about life being a passage, and as you go around, you get closer to heaven, as you get closer or older, whatever it is. But age is not the defining thing that says you're at heaven or not. There are children that have a firmer grasp on their relationship with God than some adults will. And there's some adults who have such a firm grasp on it, they're better than most people we can even think about. But what it shows you is that this parallel in there. And if your life ends and you're like this far away from heaven, that might be what you have to work out, that little bit of gap. But it's not an age-prone thing. It might be a learning process thing. That when the time comes, you've gotten yourself to a closer situation in it. But again, this is a hopeful theology. And from a morality point of view, it really talks about, for lack of a better term, effort to a certain extent, because the intent